Yeah, go ahead.
Start up where I left off.
So that's what I've gotten from the garden, and I'll weigh it.
Yeah, it's good I didn't water. I figured it'll need watering tonight after today, right? Or this evening.
Oh, it needs water.
Well, I
Everything needs
didn't want to water because I figured you'd have to harvest, right?
Yeah, but there was no way I was going to do the tunnel today. I didn't do the tunnel.
No.
I didn't do a complete harvest. So yeah, you should have watered, just for future notice.
For what? Like if you
After a hike.
Okay.
There's no way I'm good doing the tunnel.
Okay.
So this is
I tried.
a black zebra tomato, and this is another one. You might have noticed them in the bunch, and they're my least productive tomato. I don't get very many of them. Anyway, so I'm going to get weighing, and that'll be that. So you can go ahead and talk about whatever you're talking about.
Yeah. So I was talking about Moses Maimonides. Supposed to be a sign of Muslim tolerance in Spain. So he was a Jew working out of Spain, wrote philosophy in Arabic. And, some further Muslim incursions came into Spain. The Spaniards were trying to get the Muslims out of there. Who could blame this? You'd call it decolonization, not just de-imperialization. You look at some of the names of, like Gibraltar, that's an Arab name. Huh? Check it out. Guadalquivir, however you want to mispronounce it. The first part of that means Wadi of the. That's how the Spaniards said Wadi. Okay? Again, when rivers are renamed, people are colonizing. They're not just imperializing. It was brutal. The plundering and raping and burning and vandalism. Yeah, and that's a Germanic tribe. But vandalism that was taken, vandalism should be named after Arabs and all the stuff that they've done. And I'm not doing an Occidental view. I'm part African American. When I'm looking at Islam, I'm doing just as much Orientalist view. I'm doing just as much a Borealist view as an Orientalist view. And frankly, my sympathies lie when it comes to Islam with the people in India, the Hindus. And so I look at them. There's a guy called Lal, L-A-L. I think that means red in Indic languages. He's got some amazing things to say about Islam. Amazing. And it's not his opinion. It's actual fact. That four-letter word that so many left-wingers cannot stand. F-A-C-T. Fact. Or facts. Brutal facts. It's very enlightening to take a Borealist view of Islam. And then look at other people's view, like from the East, an Occidentalist view of Islam. And frankly, if they actually had a record and hadn't converted, you'd have a Australis view or something like that. Because originally, the Turkic kind of people, almost lock, stock, and gun barrel, converted to Islam. They initially were some of the major recipients of Muslim attention when it came to being turned into slaves.
What did I do with
Check it out. You don't have to believe me. I don't ask for belief. I ask for you to check it out. I can't even ask for that because I know most of you won't. You just have your convictions, and your convictions trump reality every freaking time. And I use that term Trump intentionally because you guys are just like Donald Trump. You don't believe in reality. You're going around trying to force feed your fake news into everyone else. Trump's Trump's a fake newscaster too, just like you guys. He's a hyper hypocrite when he's uh, calling out things as fake news, because a lot of the stuff he calls fake news is true as true can be. Anyway, the Moses Maimonides, when one of these incursions from North Africa, following the initial Arab incursions plural, he fled. Now he'd have been silly to flee north into Spain. Why? Because there were Christians there? No, no. It's because the Muslims, he wouldn't know how far he'd have to flee. The Muslims at one point in time, the Arabs, made it all the way to, I believe it's Tours, France. So that's Tours in English with an S put on. Not that it means that, it probably means something like towers. But I believe that's on something like the Loire River. And the Loire River isn't in the southern part of France. So why would he flee up even into France? There's no way you'd know how far these Muslim incursions would go, even in his lifetime. So he fled to Egypt. Now why did he do that? Oh, because they had such a tolerant... No, no. It's a different kind of Muslim religion there. I think it was the Fatimids who were in power there, and I think they were Shiite. And the flunkies, Muslim flunkies in Spain, were Sunni. So he was getting away from these chimps in Spain. And here's what he had to say. Okay? So, get your little memory, the learning acquisition.
Almost 8 pounds.
Okay, well, that's almost like a record. Get your learning acquisition devices. I'm kind of channeling Noam Chomsky here. He thought that there's something in the brain called a language acquisition device, based on nothing at all, no actual physical data. But maybe there's something like a learning acquisition device. So here's your chance to learn. Here's what Moses Maimonides said about the Muslims in Spain. They've treated us worse than, when he's talking about us, it's the Jews. They have treated us worse than any other group in history. And by his time, it's about 1000 AD, a little bit after. A lot of groups had a lot of history with the Jews. We're talking about the Egyptians, slave mongering the Jews, way back when. And we're talking about and that actually did happen. It's the Old Kingdom. People go, oh, that never happened. The Egyptians only had personal slaves. Yeah, that's in the Middle Kingdom and the New Kingdom. But in the Old Kingdom, they've got it misdated. The Jews were there in the Old Kingdom when you actually set all the dating systems somewhat rightly. Yeah, the Jews were there in the Old Kingdom, and they say, oh, they had plantation slavery, and they used slaves for building projects and stuff like that. No way it could be the Jews, because the Jews weren't there. Yeah, the Jews were there. Let's get that straight. Now, so Egyptian slave mongers in the Old Kingdom in Egypt. You've got, and that would be even as early as the 3rd dynasty all the way through the 6th dynasty. Then you've got I'll probably miss some of the flunkies out, but you've got the Assyrians, and they actually took off the 10 lost tribes and lost them pretty thoroughly, various parts of their empire. That was starting 722 roughly through 720 BC. You got the Babylonians, who took the Jews off, and the Jews were gone. They outlasted the Babylonians actually in Mesopotamia. They weren't allowed to go back to their homeland for, I think, roughly 70 years. So they were taken off 586 BC. And the Persian emperor allowed them to come back, the ones who wanted to. And but the Persians ultimately weren't that good. Empires tend to be that way, however enlightened they might set out to be. Then you've got the Greeks, and the Greeks, by all accounts, were pretty brutal to the Jews. And then you've got the Romans, and the Romans ethnically cleansed them twice. Cleansed the Jews twice, 70, 71 AD, and 135 AD. And then, well, you got the Arabs. And after poor Moses Maimonides, there were the Turks, but those are Muslims. And the behavior of the Muslims did not improve under the Turks. So up until recently, Muslims were going, man, the Arabs were getting soft. They were conquerors, spreading the good, well, not quite the good news, but putatively good news, and by the sword, converting by the sword, and they were getting soft, living in cities, enjoying the pleasures of the flesh. And then along came the Turks. Along came Jones, long, lean, lanky Jones, and they renewed Muslim enthusiasm for jihad. Yeah. So up until recently, they were going, yeah, that's a great thing, having these bloodthirsty Turks take over the cause of the religion. And nowadays, well, that's not the image that left-wingers, for example, are trying to give to Islam. It's a little bit hard. It's a hard sell. It's you're when you're doing that, you're at Donald Trump level. You're just making things up, reimagining, and then calling everything else fake news or fake history or whatever. You folks that are going around lying about Islam, you're as bad as Donald Trump. And that's about as bad as you can get without being, he's a fellow traveler, a Sputnik for Putin. And you flunkies that are around doing apologia for Islam, you are fellow travelers too. You're Sputniks. Russian Sputnik means fellow traveler. And, the best term for you folks is what Lenin applied to folks like you, like George Bernard Shaw, Beatrice, and Sidney Webb. He called you useful idiots. Useful idiots, that's what you are. Useful idiots. So Donald Trump's a useful idiot too, or Vladimir Putin, Vlad the Impaler. Now, let's get back to the Ming Dynasty, okay? Ming Dynasty, the Chinese didn't even control their own something like traditional territory under the Ming emperors. So how are they going to get themselves together? They can't even control the area around them. How are they going to be conquering Africa, even if they had quinine? I'm kind of looking like a Motown act here in the 60s, the Temptations. They used to do this a lot. Anyway, yeah, how are they going to be as funky as the Four Tops and what's that other group? The Temptations. No. You only have to look at how unadventurous the Chinese were at any point in their history, but in terms of exploration, discovery. You go down out of the South China Sea, and you get heading along the coast of Vietnam, and then along peninsula that's shared. Well, it's mainly Malaya, the Malayan Peninsula, Straits of Malacca. You're just going by land, and then you do coasting, I think they call it, along the other side of the Malayan Peninsula. You get up past Thailand, Burma, and stuff like that, and you coast along the Indian coast. You go down that two sides of the triangle that roughly comprises South Asia. You go along the coast of Persia, then Arabian Peninsula, jump across the Straits of Mandeb, is that what it's called? Takes you over to Africa and stuff like that. You just coast it. But if they were really adventurous, they were following stuff that had been around for hundreds and hundreds of years. The Romans, when they came to the South China Sea, maybe 100 AD or something like that, they were just following traditional routes. They'd be getting local pilots, help us through these waters here, so on and so forth. We're just here to trade. It's obvious that we don't have soldiers here, all that sort of stuff. Okay. Uh, if they'd been, the Chinese had been auto adventurers, they would just had to coast through do they call it the Malayan archipelago? But in present-day Indonesia, coast, 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 get into New Guinea, just take a little bit of a jump, and you're all of a sudden in Australia. How come they never, ever imperialized and then colonized Australia? Because they weren't like the Europeans. They weren't adventuresome. They weren't exploring. Look at what the Vikings did, getting over to the New World. It didn't take. And that's the thing. It doesn't matter if you got superior technology. If you can't get people to stay long enough for whatever reason, there might have been climatological change involved. The Vikings were they in Greenland up to 1400 AD? They were in Iceland continuously. I think they were there for about 400 years, and I think it just got a little bit too cold for them. But they weren't able to take in continental part of the New World. They had we know they had something like a little colony in Newfoundland. That's not really part of the continent. But yeah, like the Vikings did an amazing job. And if people are going, oh man, this sounds so ethnically like it's so occidental, cut that kind of crap out. Because if we really want to celebrate people of color doing stuff, going across seas, we don't look for the Chinese. We look at the Polynesians. You don't need big argosies and stuff like that. They had wee, small, little boats. And you don't need big, fancy things like astrolabes and all that sort of. Who invented it? Oh, it was the Arabs or the Muslims or whatever. Or the Chinese. They did it by the Polynesians. Were looking at cloud patterns. They were looking at wave patterns and stuff like that. They were looking at stars, looking at the astrolabes and all that sort of stuff. And where did they go? Hawaii? Look at a map. I said Easter Island. Some people ended up in Easter Island. Huh? And when you look at those effigies or whatever in stone, you look at the west coast of BC. You see totem poles and you say, yeah, why is that not like indigenous stuff to the east of the post on the west coast? It's because Polynesians ended up there. I'm part indigenous American. Sometimes there's culture spread. This isn't like the idea that, hey, there are pyramids in Mexico, must have come from Egypt. No, that's garbage. But the Polynesians traveled so far, you'd be kind of silly to think, there's no way they could have made the west coast of BC. There's so much stupidity nowadays. I don't know how so many of you people out there, like, what's your excuse for living? Now, I don't like using the term waste of space or waste of skin. Yeah, that's really gruesome. But I'm with some of you folks out there on the left wing and the right wing. You're just wastes of skull. You're just wastes of skull. I don't know if someone shook you, if your brain would even rattle in there. I don't know if there's anything in there to rattle. Useless. Anyway, yeah, the Chinese were incurious when it came to exploration. Otherwise, they would have imperialized and eventually colonized Australia. There's no sign they even touched on the northern part of it. Maybe they did. That's no guarantee things are going to take. Like with the Vikings hitting the New World. Didn't take. It's not enough just to visit a place. Hey, this is grand. We're going to set up an empire here with 40 people or something like that. The natives won't necessarily be friendly, nor should they be. Yeah. Crazy. Absolutely crazy stuff. So, speaking of crazy, we're going to start looking at the memoirs of the Second World War by Winston Churchill. And we'll be looking at...
I missed some.
Missed some tomato?
Yeah, I missed some.
Oh, there we go. Well, it's always nice to have more, you know what I'm saying?
Well, there's lots in the back that I missed, but
I know. Anyway, the problem is when you don't have enough food, and there's plenty of people suffering from that. I feel sorry for the kids who don't have enough food, but you know, when I was a kid, I used to feel so bad. You see these Oxfam commercials or whatever. Oh, there's people starving hither, thither, and yon. That sort of stuff. Yeah, and you send aid, and they continue to have more kids. Well, whose responsibility is it now? Increasingly. You know, it wasn't too long ago when the population of Africa was 200 million. I don't know what it is now. Is it close to 1 billion? You know, like whose responsibility is that? Not the people who've been sending aid. You know, what they say is, teach a guy to fish, not give him fish. And it's particularly acute if guy is having way too many kids. Nowadays, any guy who's having more than one kid for him or for a family, 2 kids, is absolutely irresponsible. I got no use for folks like that. Okay? Some places in the world, the population is just exploding, and they're going around. We're independent. We're free. But we've got dictatorships, and we're going to spread our dictatorship to you guys if you'll take us as refugees or as migrants. And we've got our country, they're independent, but we got the handout. Yeah, that's not independence. And if you don't have a democracy, that's not freedom. So don't go around saying that the third world got freedom and independence in the 1960s. In almost every case, it was worse. The regimes that were set up were worse than the regimes that were set up by the colonialists. I'm not a colonialist, but for Pete's sake, start getting some democracies and start controlling your population. Start getting responsible for the rest of the world instead of having your hand out to people who actually educate their kids and are result productive. Educate your kids. Don't spend money on arms. Hey, we got to have our People's Army in Rhodesia or Zimbabwe. That's not independence, and it's not freedom, because the arms tend to get used on the local populace. But and the thing is, you don't have a democracy. Get out and do what English folks did, and they sacrificed their lives to get a real democracy. Yeah? Get out and do it instead of coming over here and saying, "Hey, you know, let's enjoy the fruits of your democracy." But ultimately, when we get the whip hand when it comes to population, we'll be voting in a dictatorship, just like we've always practiced and ultimately always believed in. Yeah. Cut out that crap. Anyway, so this is actually I think Churchill put out 5 or 6 volumes. And, yeah, I got it right. The abridgment of 6 volumes of the Second World War, with an epilogue by the author, that'd be Winston Churchill, on the post-war years, written for this volume. So the epilogue was written for this volume, not the post-war years. Anyway, so it kind of makes depressing reading, really, because you look at what happened, and, you know, the Americans got so much right when it comes to World War II. They were wrong, and this is the American, not the American leadership, but American people. Oh, let's just sit on our hands here while the world goes down in flames, and I'm sure the dictatorships will leave us alone. Yeah, like fun. So, yeah, before Pearl Harbor, apparently support amongst the American voting populace for fighting against Germany is 17%. 17%. And even after Pearl Harbor, it probably wouldn't have been too high, except Hitler. A few days, I think within a week of Pearl Harbor, he actually got, I think he thought he owed something to the Japanese. He declared war on the United States, and like reading one guy, he's cynical about FDR, Franklin Delano Roosevelt. Oh, that's exactly what he wanted. He wanted to fight Germany. Well, like he wanted to fight Germany when, on American terms. He didn't want to fight anyone. But when you got when you got a rabid dog, you better take it on before it starts whacking lots of people. As soon as you take it on, wipe it out, the better. And that's what FDR was thinking. It wasn't, man, oh man, I'm just thirsting after violence, and I want to kill Germans and lots of, no. He wanted to take on the Germans as soon as possible. And he did. And I'm telling you, he did a fantastic job of cleaning their clocks. The Germans helped, of course. After World War II, there's no one who's going to go along and say, well, like we could keep a guerrilla movement going in Germany and we'll just supply them the way the commies were in Vietnam and Korea and almost any place in the world, Cuba, so on and so forth. Just keep on supplying guerrilla activity. It's really terrorist activity, right? And the Americans cleaned the Germans' clock up in, well, let me see, 42, 43, 44, 45, in less than 4 years. Just wiped their clock, cleaned their clock.
And you haven't even started in on the Tikka Masala and cauliflower.
No, I haven't. I've been trying to fit stuff in. How much time left? About
Couple
8?
minutes.
7?
Couple minutes.
A couple of minutes. Anyway, stay tuned for this. We'll kind of go through some of the things Churchill has to say. A highlight will be, for many people, be a low light. I used to think Churchill was a real nut bar for going after Turkey in World War I. Gallipoli. That's incidentally. If you listen to the Poli part of that, it actually tells you who the natives are in Western Turkey. That'd be short for Polis, city in Greek. There are Hittite records that indicate Greeks are in the western part of Turkey. This is on a revised chronology, 900 or so BC. And they were finally ethnically cleansed close to my dad's lifetime, and my dad died 2 years ago. Greeks. 1 million of them. Cleansed out of their homeland. And they were traded for, I think it was 1.5 million. 1 million Turks in Europe. Turks are native to Siberia. That's not a fair trade. That's not a fair trade. When you're trading imperialists and colonialists for native people. Gallipoli. But you look at military science and they say it's just suicidal to do a frontal attack, a full frontal attack on people that are well entrenched. And that's when you're entrenched. When you're dealing with coming across the Atlantic, this is like now we're switching to World War II. Not the Atlantic, but the Channel, the English Channel as it's called, or La Manche in French. That's suicidal. So Hitler or Churchill's instincts were right. What you tend to want to do, this is in a battle, but I think the same thing applies in a war. You come around